The Bell-Beaker culture c. 2800–1800 BCE is the term for a widely scattered archaeological culture of prehistoric Western Europe starting in the late Neolithic or Chalcolithic and running into the early Bronze Age. The term was coined by John Abercromby, based on the culture's distinctive pottery drinking vessels. Introduction. The Bell-Beaker culture is understood not only as a particular pottery type, but as a complete and complex cultural phenomenon involving metalwork in copper, gold and later bronze, archery, specific types of ornamentation and shared ideological, cultural and religious ideas. The Bell-Beaker period marks a period of cultural contact in Atlantic and Western Europe on a scale not seen previously, nor seen again in succeeding periods. It can be seen initially as the Western equivalent of the contemporary corded ware culture, though from c. 2400 BCE Bell-Beaker expanded eastwards over parts of Central and Eastern Europe where corded ware previously thrived. Thus in parts of Central and Eastern Europe, as far east as Poland, there is a sequence from corded ware to Bell-Beaker, but this is not the case in Iberia, France or the British Isles, where corded ware is unknown. It is important to note that underlying the Bell-Beaker superstratum existed a wide diversity in local burial styles, housing styles, economic profile and local coarse ceramic wares which continued to persist. There are two main international Bell-Beaker styles: the all-over ornamented patterned all-over with impressions, of which a subset is the all-over corded patterned with cord impressions, and the maritime type, decorated with bands filled with impressions made with a comb or cord. Later, characteristic regional styles developed. It has been suggested that the beakers were designed for the consumption of alcohol, and that the introduction of the substance to Europe may have fueled the beaker's spread. Beer and mead content have been identified from certain examples. However, not all beakers were drinking cups. Some were used as reduction pots to smelt copper ores, others have some organic residues associated with food, and still others were employed as funerary urns. They were used as status display amongst disparate elites. Origins. There have been numerous proposals by archaeologists as to the origins of the Bell-Beaker culture, and debates continued on for decades. Several regions of origin have been postulated, notably the Iberian Peninsula, the Netherlands and Central Europe. Similarly, scholars have postulated various mechanisms of spread, including migrations of populations, smaller warrior groups, individuals, or a diffusion of ideas and object exchange. Recent analyses have made significant inroads to understanding the beaker phenomenon, mostly by analyzing each of its components separately. They have concluded that the Bell-Beaker phenomenon was a synthesis of elements, representing an idea and style uniting different regions with different cultural traditions and background. Radiocarbon dating seems to support that the earliest maritime Bell-Beaker design style is encountered in Iberia, specifically in the vibrant copper-using communities of the Tagus estuary in Portugal around 2800–700 BC and spread from there to many parts of Western Europe. An overview of all available sources from southern Germany concluded that Bell-Beaker was a new and independent culture in that area, contemporary with the corded ware culture. The inspiration for the maritime Bell-Beaker is argued to have been the small and earlier kopos beakers that have impressed decoration and which are found widely around the Tagus estuary in Portugal. Turkey's late Neolithic precursors in northern Africa, arguing the maritime style emerged as a result of seaborne contacts between Iberia and Morocco in the first half of the 3rd millennium BCE. However, radiocarbon dating from North African sites is lacking for the most part. AOO and AOC beakers appear to have evolved continually pottery from a pre-Beaker period in the Lower Rhine and North Sea regions, at least for northern and central Europe. Furthermore, the burial ritual which typified Bell-Beaker sites was intrusive into Western Europe. Individual burials are often under tumuli burials, with the inclusion of weapons contrast markedly to the preceding Neolithic traditions of often collective, weaponless burials in Atlantic Western Europe. Such an arrangement is rather derivative of corded ware traditions, although, instead of battle axes, Bell-Beaker individuals used copper daggers. Overall, all these elements appear to have first fused in the Lower Rhine region. Expansion and culture contact. The initial moves from the Tagus estuary were maritime. A southern move led to the Mediterranean, where enclaves were established in southwestern Spain and southern France around the Gulf du Lion, and into the Po Valley in Italy, probably via ancient western alpine trade routes used to distribute jadeite axes. A northern move incorporated the southern coast of Armorica. The enclave established in southern Brittany was linked closely to the riverine and landward route via the Loire, and across the Gâtinais Valley to the Seine Valley, and thence to the Lower Rhine. This was a long-established route reflected in early stone axe distributions, and it was via this network that maritime Bell-Beakers first reached the Lower Rhine in about 2600 BC. Another pulse had brought Bell-Beaker to Sepal Island in Hungary by about 2500 BC. In the Carpathian Basin, the Bell-Beaker culture came in contact with communities such as the Vucedol culture, which had evolved partly from the Yamna culture, and therefore shared the same type of metallurgy practiced by Bell-Beaker metal workers. But in contrast to the early Bell-Beaker preference for the dagger and bow, the favorite weapon in the Carpathian Basin during the first half of the 3rd millennium was the shaft-hole axe. Here, Bell-Beaker people assimilated local pottery forms such as the polopodka. These common ware types of pottery then spread in association with the classic Bell-Beaker. For the Carpathian Basin, Bell-Beaker spread down the Rhine and eastwards into what is now Germany and Poland. By this time the Rhine was on the western edge of the vast corded ware zone. The corded ware culture shared a number of features with the Bell-Beaker culture, derived from the common ancestor the Yamna culture. These features include pottery decorated with cord impressions, single burial and a shaft-hole axe. A review in 2014 revealed that single burial, communal burial and reuse of Neolithic burial sites are found throughout the Bell-Beaker zone. This overturns a previous conviction that single burial was unknown in the earlier southern Bell-Beaker zone, and so must have been adopted from corded ware in the contact zone of the Lower Rhine, and transmitted westwards along the exchange networks from the Rhine to the Loire, and northwards across the English Channel to Britain. The earliest copper production in Ireland, identified at Ross Island in the period 2400–2200 BC, was associated with early Beaker pottery. Here the local sulfarsenide ores were smelted to produce the first copper axes used in Britain and Ireland. The same technologies were used in the Tagus region and in the western south of France. The evidence is sufficient to support the suggestion that the initial spread of maritime Bell-Beakers along the Atlantic and into the Mediterranean, using sea routes that had long been in operation, was directly associated with the quest for copper and other rare raw materials. Migration versus acculturation. Given the unusual form and fabric of Beaker pottery, and its abrupt appearance in the archaeological record, along with a characteristic group of other artifacts, known as the Bell-Beaker package, the explanation for the Beaker culture until the last decades of the 20th century was to interpret it as the migration of one group of people across Europe. However, British and American archaeology since the 1960s had been skeptical about prehistoric migration in general, so the idea of Bell-Beaker folk lost ground, although recent genetic findings lend renewed support to the migratory hypothesis. A theory of cultural contact emphasizing population movement was presented by Colin Burgess and Stephen Shannon in the mid-1970s. Under the pots, not people theory, the Beaker culture is seen as a package of knowledge and artifacts adopted and adapted by the indigenous peoples of Europe. To varying degrees, this new knowledge may have come about by any combination of population movements and cultural contact. An example might be as part of a prestige cult related to the production and consumption of beer, or trading links such as those demonstrated by finds made along the seaways of Atlantic Europe. Paleontological studies, including analysis of pollen associated with the spread of beakers, certainly suggests increased growing of barley, which may be associated with beer brewing, noting the distribution of beakers was highest in areas of transport routes, including fording sites, river valleys and mountain passes. It was suggested that beaker folk were originally bronze traders, who subsequently settled within local Neolithic or early Chalcolithic cultures, creating local styles. Close analysis of the bronze tools associated with beaker use suggests an early Iberian source for the copper, followed subsequently by Central European and Bohemian ores. Investigations in the Mediterranean and France recently moved the discussion to re-emphasize the importance of migration to the Bell-Beaker story, instead of being pictured as a fashion or a simple diffusion of objects and the use. The investigation of over 300 sites showed that human groups actually moved in a process that involved explorations, contacts, settlement, diffusion, and acculturation, assimilation. Some elements show the influence from the north and east, and other elements reveal the southeast of France to be an important crossroad on an important route of communication and exchange spreading north. A distinctive barbed wire pottery decoration is thought to have migrated through central Italy first. The pattern of movements was diverse and complicated along the Atlantic coast and the northern Mediterranean coast, and sometimes also far inland. The prominent central role of Portugal in the region and the quality of the pottery all across Europe are forwarded as arguments for a new interpretation that denies an ideological dimension. A strontium isotope analysis of 86 people from Bell-Beaker graves in Bavaria suggests that 18 to 25% of all graves were occupied by people who came from a considerable distance outside the area. This was true of children as well as adults, indicative of some significant migration wave. Given the similarities with readings from people living on low soils, the general direction of the local movement according to Price et al. is from the northeast to the southwest.